If you're an SAP BW consultant or a customer, listen up. Your world has changed massively in the last 12 months. If you, as an SAP consultant, are making $60 an hour and wondering what's going to happen with all this AI pounding down on all of us, then this video is for you. Because 3 years ago, I sat with a consultant, brilliant guy, 18 years in SAP BW, one of the best architects I've ever worked with. I told him the BW world was ending, and he said, Noel, there are still thousands of companies still on SAP BW. I got at least 5 years. Well, he was wrong, and I'll tell you what happened to him. But first, you need to understand what SAP just did, because they didn't just release a new product, they rebuilt the entire data stack from the ground up. And when you see what's in that stack, you'll understand why BW doesn't appear anywhere in that stack. So stay till the end, because once I explain the problem to you, the context and what's changing, you will know exactly how to handle this change perfectly. You will crush it like a piece of cake. So let me take you back so that this makes sense. In the old SAP world, you had your ERP system, which was ECC, and that's where your transactions lived. Your purchase orders, your invoices, your journal entries, your good movements, your raw transactional data sitting in tables. But that data on its own was useless for decision making. You couldn't report on it properly. You couldn't do trend analysis. You couldn't, give your CFO a dashboard that actually made sense. So SAP built BW, the business warehouse. BW's job was to extract the data out of ECC, transform it, and load it into a separate reporting environment and make it available for analysis. Classic ETL, extract, transform, load. You had info providers, info cubes, DSOs, process chains running overnight to move data from one system to another. And then you'd build reports on top of that in business objects or BX. That was the world, and it worked. For 20 years, it worked. An entire generation of consultants built careers on that complexity. The data models, the transformation, the performance tuning, knowing exactly how to get the data out of ECC into BW in a way that actually made sense. Now, that was a very serious skills. Senior BW architects were billing $150 an hour. But that world had a fundamental problem. Everything was disconnected. ECC here, BW there, business objects somewhere else. Every time you wanted a new report, somebody had to build a new extraction, a new transformation, a new data model. Weeks of work, sometimes months, and companies spending millions just on integration. Now, that's the world SAP just walked away from. So here's what SAP built to replace all of that. And I want to walk you through it layer by layer, because each piece has a very specific role. And if you understand the stack, you understand everything that's happening in SAP right now. So layer one is S4HANA. Now this replaced ECC, but it's not just a new version of ECC. S4HANA runs on an in-memory database, HANA. Your transactional data, your purchase orders, your financial postings, your inventory movements, all of it sits in a system that can be read in real time. So you don't need to extract it overnight anymore. That data is already in a format that can be accessed directly. Now, S4HANA also introduced something called data products, pre-built, standardized data sets that expose transactional data in a clean, consumable format. So think of data products as SAP saying, here's your data, already structured, already governed, ready to go. No extraction needed. That alone made half of what BW used to do unnecessary. Half the extraction logic, half the transformation work gone. Because the source system now does what the warehouse used to do. Now, in layer two, you have SAP Datasphere. So this is the data management and the integration layer. Now, Datasphere connects to S4HANA and reads those data products directly. But it does more than that. Datasphere also connects to non-SAP sources. So your Salesforce data, your third-party logistics system, your external market data, whatever you've got, Datasphere brings it all together into one semantic, one business context, one version of the truth across all your data sources. Now, here's the part nobody in the SAP YouTube space is talking about. Datasphere is built on a partnership with Databricks. So SAP, who built BW, who built the entire data warehousing paradigm that thousands of consultants built careers on, looked at the market and said, our stack isn't enough. We need Databricks as the underlying data lake layer. Now, that's not a product update. That's SAP actually walking away from its BW architecture entirely. info providers, process chains, DSOs, all of it built on a paradigm that SAP themselves just moved fast. Now, they chose a foundation that has got nothing to do with SAP BW, architecturally incompatible with it. So, layer three is SAP Analytics Cloud or SAC, which is your reporting and your planning front end, which includes your dashboards, visualizations, financial planning, predictive analytics. And SAC connects directly to Datasphere, so there's no more building of reports and business objects on top of BW extracts. SAC reads from Datasphere, which reads from S4HANA. Data flows in real time through a unified stack, so there's no overnight batch jobs, there's no process chains, there's no waiting until tomorrow morning to see yesterday's numbers. Now, layer 4 is Joule, which is the SAP AI layer. And Joule sits on top of all of this and turns data into action, not reports, action. You ask Joule a question in plain language, which suppliers are showing delivery risk this quarter, and Joule goes into Datasphere. It pulls the relevant data products from S4HANA, cross-references the third-party data, applies AI models, and gives you an answer with reasoning and recommended actions. So there's no analyst needed, there's no report needed, a question and an answer. So SAP took all four of these layers, Datasphere, Analytics Cloud, the Data Product Framework, and Joule, and wrapped them into one managed cloud service, one platform, one commercial offering, and that's called BDC, the Business Data Cloud, which was launched in Q1 of 2025, and it's available on AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. Now, BDC is not BW's successor. I need you to hear that very clearly. It's not an upgrade. It's not a migration path. It's a completely different architecture built on a completely different technology. Now, BW was all about extraction and transformation, and BDC is all about real-time integration and AI-driven intelligence. Now, the skills don't overlap and the paradigms don't connect. So one more piece, SAP just announced that they're acquiring Reltio and they're closing it in Q2 or Q3 of 2026. Now, SAP has had MDG over the last decade, so which is Master Data Governance, and companies spend millions implementing it. So why go and buy a cloud-native master data company built entirely outside of the SAP ecosystem? Because MDG wasn't enough. SAP knows that Joule and the agents running on BDC are only as good as the data underneath it. So if your supplier master data has three different names for the same vendor across three systems, Joule gives you garbage. So your AI agents automate bad decisions at scale. And I saw this firsthand. I worked with an organization that invested heavily into a new analytics platform. And 18 months in the dashboards were live, but the numbers were all wrong. Suppliers with three different names, duplicate master records going back a decade. Cost center hierarchies nobody cleaned up since 2014. And the leadership went back to spreadsheets, tens of millions back to Excel. When I asked about master data, the answer that we all assumed was that the migration would clean it up. And Gartner says that 60% of all AI projects get abandoned in 2026 because organizations don't have AI-ready data. So SAP acquiring Reltio is them trying to fix that gap before it kills the BDC adoption. So let me show you what the stack does when it works. So a procurement manager at a manufacturing company starts on Monday morning. She doesn't open a report. She doesn't run a query. She just asks Joule, which of her top 20 suppliers are showing signs of delivery risk this quarter? So Joule goes into BDC. It reads the supplier performance data products from S4HANA through Datasphere. Now it checks the financial stability signals from external sources, also connected through Datasphere. And it cross-references logistics data. And then it surfaces three suppliers with the reasoning, a historical context, and a recommended action for each. Now, in the old world, that needed a BW data model, an info provider, a process chain running overnight, a report built in business object, an analyst interpreting the output next morning, 5 roles in 2 days minimum. Now it's just a question and an answer. You can get the answer in seconds. One agent, SAP is 40 deployed right now in invoice creation, contract analysis that reads contracts, flags compliance issues, and extracts key terms. Finance intelligence running on BDC and people analytics across success factors. So they're building agent-to-agent communication. A procurement agent flags the supplier risk. They automatically trigger a finance agent to review payment terms. And that triggers a logistics agent to assess alternate sourcing. There's no human in the middle. The system decides, and humans review the outcomes, not the inputs. So every one of these agents run on BDC. Without BDC, Joule is just a chatbot. But with BDC, Joule becomes an operating layer across your entire enterprise. Now, that consultant I mentioned at the start, he wasn't lazy, he wasn't stupid. He looked at the market and made a rational bet. Thousands of companies still on BW, good money, steady work. He was right about the present, but he was wrong about how fast the future would arrive. Now look at the rates. 5 years ago, an SAP BW architect was billing around $150 an hour. Today, that same work goes for $60 to $80. Meanwhile, a Datasphere architect and a BDC implementation consultant comes in, approximately $120 plus. The market has already priced this in. It happened very quietly, fewer calls, lower offers, longer bench time. And that's how a consulting career ends. There's no announcement, it's just silence. SAP already released the data product generator and it automatically migrates BW models into the new BDC environment. They're building the automation that removes the manual migration work, that BW consultants used to charge for. The 5-year window is closing faster than anyone expected. Now, BW consultants, well, the roles will still exist, but the ceiling is visible and dropping every quarter. SAC consultants, they're still in demand, but SAC is now moving to the front end, not the destination. Value is moving upstream into data architecture and AI integration. If your entire skill is building dashboards, the ceiling on your career just got lower. Business object consultants, extended maintenance goes up to end of 2027, potentially up to 2030. After that, the roadmap goes quiet. Your role has a visible end date. Now, here's the other side. Datasphere architects, BDC implementation consultants, Joule agents developers, AI integration specialists who understand SAP process logic and how to design agents. These roles are being created right now. The combination of deep functional knowledge and AI agent design is extremely rare, and people who have it are setting their own rates. The window to build that combination is open. It won't stay this wide for long. So if you're a company, three things. BDC is cloud only. There's no on-premise version coming. If your strategy is staying on-prem past the 2027 deadline, BDC isn't available to you. BDC assumes S4HANA, so it's built around data products and the clean core. So if you're still on ECC, your migration just got more urgent. And audit your data before you sign anything, master data, hierarchies, vendor records. This work isn't glamorous. It doesn't make the implementation pitch, but it's the difference between a transformation and a very expensive lesson. So coming back to my friend that I talked about earlier, my friend reached out 6 months ago. He is deep into Datasphere and BDC architecture now, moving, but catching up, not leading. He wishes he started 2 years earlier. Now I know what you're thinking. Okay, Noel, I get it. But what do I do actually? Where do I start? What do I learn first? So I'm going to cover all of that in the next video, step by step, lane by lane, exactly how you need to position yourself on the right side of the ship, depending on where you are right now. So make sure that you're subscribed because that one's coming soon. Now the entire stack is clear. S4HANA generates the data, Datasphere integrates it, SAC visualizes it, Joule acts on it, BDC wraps it all together. Now, BW doesn't appear anywhere in that architecture. Not because SAP forgot about it, because they replaced the need for it entirely. So, I'm Noel Benjamin DCosta. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.